You are listening to the Redesign Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Grogan. I am a certified life coach, and each week I am going to help you take imperfect action toward creating a fulfilling and meaningful life. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the Redesign Your Life podcast. So today I want to talk about something I don't think I've shared on the podcast before, and that is my relationship with time. So my hope is that this episode will inspire you to think about your relationship with time, because here's what I know to be true. In order to redesign your life, you will have to think about and possibly redesign how you use your time. So I'm thinking about this episode as more of a conversation starter, something we can explore together in future episodes too. And if this topic resonates with you, I want to invite you to take it offline with me. You can email me or message me, and I'll put those details in the show notes. First, I want to talk about how I use my time and why I've hesitated to share it. So my guess is that my life looks very different than yours. My husband and I travel full-time in our RV. We don't have kids. And we have very few social or family obligations unless we're physically with family and friends, which does happen. When I have meetings over Zoom, they're conversations I want to have. They're with coaching clients and peers and friends. I don't set alarms unless absolutely necessary. I go to bed when I'm sleepy and I wake up naturally. And most of my days are structured around what I want to do. I am incredibly grateful for this life that I've designed. It hasn't always been like this, and I suspect like in the future there will be seasons where it does look very different. But for now, this is what it looks like. And up until today, I have been hesitant to share these details. And I realized why after I attended a workshop this week called Time Management in Our Modern Age. And the workshop had some really great journaling prompts, and one of them uncovered a fear I didn't even realize I had. So I have this idea that if I share with you how much time freedom I have, that you, my dear listener, might judge me, that you might think, well, like she does not get my life or my responsibilities, or she couldn't help me as a coach. Like a lot of thoughts that really hold me back. And so I brought this fear to my coach, and I explained to her like why I absolutely should not talk about this on the podcast. In this very lovely, matter-of-fact way, she asked, well, do your current coaching clients know how you live? Yeah. Is their life like yours? Oh, no, not at all. Has that stopped them from working with you? No. Well, why is that? She asked. Because, I said, coaching isn't about me. It's about them. Like my job is to help them step back and examine their lives, to explore what's working, what's not, what's possible. And then she said something else that really landed. She said, well, is it possible that maybe because your life looks different, you actually bring a fresh perspective to how they think about time? Huh. So hopefully that is what I'm doing for you today. And what I realized from all of this is, and this is what I think is interesting, is that no matter what lifestyle we have, we all have judgments about time. We worry about how we spend it, how others perceive we spend it, and whether or not we're using it wisely. Western culture in particular teaches us that unless we're busy climbing the ladder, checking off boxes, maximizing every minute, we're somehow failing. But is that really true? So a fellow workshop attendee shared this really great article that I want to talk about on the podcast today too. It's from the Harvard Business Review, and it has this great title. It says, "My Fixation with Time Management Almost Killed Me." And it's by Abby J. Shipp. And I'll include a link to this in the show notes if you want to read it for yourself. It's a good read. It's pretty quick too. So Shipp is a professor who her entire academic focus is on understanding how time works. And she starts the article by saying, in 2019, I hit a wall. To the outside observer, my career was successful, my family was happy, and I seemed to be living the dream. What people didn't know, however, was that I was struggling with chronic insomnia, malnourishment, a pinched nerve in my neck, and a wicked hormonal imbalance. I would later discover that, ironically, time management was to blame. So she goes on in the article to talk about how she had set up her schedule. So basically, she had done what many of us think we need to do with our time in order to have a good life. So she had optimized her schedule down to the minute. Her work was hyper-focused. She made sure that she was finished on time so that nights and weekends were free from doing work. And yet, even after doing all that, her life was not perfect or happy, and her body was suffering. And she was no longer finding her work fulfilling. She writes that the work felt meaningless, like a series of scheduled tasks, one after another, repeated to infinity. Her article really struck me because it goes against what so many people think is true. So many of us think that feeling happy and feeling fulfilled will result from having this perfectly managed schedule. If we could just fit everything into these boxes, we'll be okay. But what if that's not even the real issue? Because the answer for Ship, and she reveals this in the article, wasn't in further optimizing her time. It was in changing her entire relationship with time. She shifted from seeing time as something that was rigid, that was measured by clocks and schedules, and she started paying more attention to how time felt to her. So instead of structuring her day around external rules like, well, I must work 9 to 5 or lunch has to be at noon, she began to tune into her own energy and her own natural rhythms. And she let things flow more based on what made sense for her rather than just following the clock. So it's like that difference between forcing yourself to follow a schedule because that's just how it's done versus designing your time in a way that actually feels good and it works for you. So as I read her article, I had a realization that the way that she's describing where she moved to, that's exactly how I already structure my time. My days feel fluid rather than rigid. They're guided more by energy than by force. And it helped me understand why my way of doing things just feels right to me. And honestly, I felt like the article really gave me permission to stop trying to shove myself into a different, stricter schedule, which is something I attempt to do at least once a quarter. Like it gave me permission almost to be me. So I want to turn this back to you. If anything I've shared today resonated, or maybe this has been on your mind for a while, what small shifts around time could you explore? Acknowledging that your life looks like your life, not like my life. You probably have very different constraints than I do. So you could start this exploration by asking yourself some fun what if questions about your schedule. Here are some ideas I came up with. Of course, there are many. So you could ask something like, all right, well, if this meeting I'm going to attend later this week was half as long, what would I cut? Would anyone actually miss it? Or if we doubled the time, could it become a space for real collaboration and connection instead of just checking a box? Yep, we had a meeting. Or what if the meeting wasn't just us sitting around and talking? Could we take a walk, introduce a new setting, or even meet almost asynchronously in some way, shape, or form to free up time? Or you could say, like, if I looked at my schedule as an outsider, what would I notice as getting squeezed out? What would it take to make space for things that actually energize me instead of just fitting them in when I'm already exhausted? If I had an entire day free, what would I do with it? Essentially, start looking at your schedule or the way you arrange your time and ask, like, what could benefit from a little more time, a little less time, or a complete rearrangement? So here's my challenge for you this week. Ask yourself a few what if questions about your time and take one tiny step to shake things up. It could be as simple as pausing for a moment to notice how you feel about your time, just being really honest with yourself. Or maybe you're going to experiment with some sort of small change. Pay attention to what shifts for you when you move towards maybe what gives you more energy, what feels right to you. And who knows, that might open up something new for you. So as for me, my next imperfect step, and this is going to sound completely random, I am going to go stare deeply into the eyes of a horse. Like I said, I know this is completely random, but we're staying on a horse ranch for the next 2 weeks. And one of my clients asked me if I've ever actually stared deeply into a horse's eyes because it's a profound experience. And I said, no, because frankly, I'm a little nervous around horses. So I'm going to take some of my unstructured, unscheduled time to just do something that's wildly different for me and see what happens. And if you're also wondering if I did my one imperfect action from last week, where I mentioned I was going to do a resistance band workout, I did, and it was imperfect. I was talking to my friend Zoe this morning, and I said that if someone really wanted me to do a resistance band workout, they wouldn't have called them resistance bands. And she said, Lynn, just go get those bands right now and just put one around your thighs. And while we're talking, do some thigh exercises or something, or some stretches or whatever you want to call them. So that is what I did. We also talked about how we should be now calling them something like expander banders instead of resistance band, because that is so much better and I might actually want to do them in the future. So that, my friend, is an example of a very imperfect step forward. And if you want to share your next imperfect step, if it's related to last week's episode or this week about time, hit me up at lynn@lynngrogan.com or on Instagram @lynngrogan. Until next time.